Welcome to Ryan's Running Reviews in partnership with Roadrunner Sports, and today we're taking a look at one of Adidas super trainers. I'm talking about the Adidas Boston 13, so let's run with it. Before we get started, I do want to say that these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports, however, no one had a chance to preview this video, and this file synopsis is my own. I'd also like to say please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. The Boston 13, at least according to Adidas on their website, is a long run shoe. Now, personally, I consider this more of a super trainer, mainly because it has all the hallmarks that fit into that category. We have a super foam in the midsole. We have full length energy rods, which are pretty much Adidas' version of having a plate or stiffening element, which does help add some rigidity to the midsole, helps you pick up the pace. And this is basically what I would consider a rotted, plated, up-tempo, neutral daily trainer. Great for, I think, pretty much anything. It's one of the more popular Adidas models. A lot of people like it because it offers a great ride without sacrificing a whole lot of support. I would consider this one of the more stable super trainer models out there. And of course, we'll also touch on the Adidas Evo SL, which is one of my personal favorite super trainers. There's a couple similarities and differences, and again, we'll touch on that later on in the review. I wouldn't consider this a complete redesign of the Boston, but again, we do have some large changes that we'll touch on as we go into the video. And then for the stats, the shoe costs $160, which is actually a pretty good value for the super trainer space, considering most other shoes in this category are at the $170 to $200 price point. So I do think it comes in a bit lower compared to the competition. However, it weighs about 9.1 ounces, which is on the heavier side of things, especially for a super trainer, which I think is probably one of the bigger drawbacks of the Boston compared to the other shoes in this category. 9.1 ounces isn't super heavy, but it's about what you would expect for a regular daily trainer. So for this to be one of the more, I guess, upscale shoes to come in at that weight is going to be on the heavier side of things. And then finally, stack height. It's actually printed on the side of the midsole. I kind of like when Adidas adds these small touches. We have 36 in the heel and 30 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. I believe they took away a millimeter or two of stack height compared to the prior Boston version. So roughly the same midsole. You have something a little bit below 40mm, kind of stays away from that Ultramax max cushion space, keeping it relatively moderate at 36mm, which is kind of a wild thing to say. 36mm is still a ton of cushioning. The upper for me fit true to size, no major complaints, had a rather traditional fit, not overly cramped or anything like that. The upper material is also very breathable. It's a rather robust, kind of synthetic plastic-like mesh. You can see directly into the shoe, large open holes that allow for a great deal of airflow. Not as minimal compared to some elite racing uppers, but still has that more minimal feel to it. Then at the toe box, we have a rather robust toe guard, which supports that upper material. I think helps keep the overall silhouette. And as a side note, not that it matters at all, but I really like what Adidas has been doing with their design language here. The large, clean 3 stripes on the side. Kind of see this on the Boston, the Evo SL, the Pro, and a lot of their other kind of more fast up-tempo shoes. I think it just looks pretty neat, and they really got it dialed in for whatever that's worth. And then if we move on to the tongue, it is lightly padded, a more minimal experience. It is gusseted on both sides with some overlays at the top of the tongue to help with lace pressure protection, and a strip of fabric that kind of helps keep all the laces organized and also gives you a little bit of protection as well. But overall, it's a very minimal tongue, very lightly cushioned. And then if we go to the ankle and Achilles section, light amount of padding here as well, with a rather robust and a sturdy heel counter, strong spine, doesn't move around that easy. And I was quite happy with the lockdown. I think Adidas has it kind of dialed in. I actually like the upper on the Evo SL as well, somewhat similar. I know some people had some strong feelings on that. Personally, I didn't mind it too much. This feels somewhat similar, maybe a little bit more robust with the tongue and other materials. But overall, really like it. Very simple, straightforward, breathable, fits well, and keeps the foot secure. And then for the midsole, it's somewhat similar to what we saw before. It's a whole lot of different things going on with it. 2 different kinds of foam. Most of it is going to be Light Strike Pro, about 14% more according to Adidas compared to the prior Boston. Most of the Light Strike Pros can be found in the forefoot, but it does extend back towards the heel as well. Light Strike Pro, to varying degrees, is what's found on Adidas top tier elite racing shoes. And based on my experience with this shoe and just by the feel of it, it feels like the version of Light Strike Pro that was found on the Pro Pro 3, I believe, which is the slightly more tame version of it. On the Pro 4, it became much softer and squishier. So it's a slightly toned down version of Lightstrike Pro, and my best guess is it's the same kind we see on the Adidas Evo SL as well. And then underneath all that Lightstrike Pro, we have a more traditional Lightstrike 2.0 foam, which is going to be a more dense EVA material, provides you a little bit more support. It's not as squishy or as squirrely compared to the Lightstrike Pro that sits on top. And most of that Lightstrike 2.0, the more traditional foam, sits in the heel. And then in between these two layers of foam, we have full-length energy rods. You can see them poking out here on the outsole, a little bit of a cutout. Now these energy rods are actually glass fiber infused ones, which are going to be a little bit more flexible and less aggressive compared to the carbon ones we see on their elite racing shoes. So a little bit more bend and flex, helps reinforce the rocker geometry, but won't be as aggressive compared to some of the other Adidas energy rod setups, just because of the materials that were used here. And then if we flip it over to the outsole, we actually have two different kinds of rubber. Adidas really threw everything they had at this shoe. Most of it is going to be that Continental premium tire rubber, really grippy, has a little bit more durability to it, while the light gray foam that goes along the lateral edge and then on the medial side of the heel is going to be light traction, which is a lighter rubber that's supposed to reduce weight. And I think both of these worked quite well together. It's a very smooth kind of race car tire like traction pattern. Didn't have any issues, and I think it performs quite well. You can see Adidas paid a lot of intentional design with the type of textures that they have, with a very smooth portion at the toe area, a little bit more texture through the midfoot, and then that light traction along the edge to try to help reduce weight. Adidas does have some cool colorways. I actually did most of my testing in a different option that Roadrunner Sports doesn't carry. However, they sent me this one for demonstration purposes, and I think it looks much cooler. The one I had before was like a basic white, and I kind of like the green here with the silver accent. Again, I really like what Adidas is doing with their design. I think it just looks quite classy and just absolutely clean. So with all that being said, how does the Boston 13 perform? Well, I consider this more of a stable, supportive super trainer. The Lightstrike 2.0, that EVA firmer foam that sits primarily in the heel but also extends directly underneath the forefoot, I think does an excellent job of containing the Lightstrike Pro, but does make it feel a little bit more, I'd say, toned down or nerfed, if you will, especially if you compare it to the Evo SL, which is pure Lightstrike Pro, which is significantly softer and bouncier. There is a massive difference between these shoes. Now, the Evo SL, I think, is less stable, not as supportive. It's also going to be about a full ounce less compared to the Boston 13. This is, I believe, 8.1 ounces, and again, the Boston 13 is 9.1, so a much heavier shoe. However, if you're someone who wants a super trainer or a long run shoe or something for speed work that has more guidance and support, especially towards the back, I think the Boston 13 is going to be your friend. Again, this is not a stability shoe. It's just a rather stable neutral option. That's because of the firmer foam in the heel, which just gives you more inherent stability. The energy rods, I think, do an excellent job of taking advantage of or helping you notice that rocker geometry. It rolls along very well. It is very noticeable. I think is probably one of the strong points of the shoe. And I do appreciate the Lightstrike Pro in the forefoot. It really comes alive once you start to push the pace, but again, is contained and nerfed by that bottom layer of Lightstrike 2.0, the firmer EVA foam. I think it's a solid long run shoe. Personally, in Ryan's taste, I do prefer the Evo SL for faster work or for something a little bit bouncier and springier, but I actually like this for when my legs are a bit more fatigued, or if I just want some more, I guess, guidance, if you will, on my long runs, just because of the materials that they use. I think another big benefit to the Boston is the durability. Lightstrike Pro, I think, has a solid life to it, and then having the Lightstrike 2.0 underneath, I think, gives it even more life and durability, or just longevity in general. And then, of course, we have solid rubber coverage on the bottom. I think this also helps to the durability aspect. So for 160 bucks, I think you definitely get your money's worth for the super trainer space. It is going to be a little bit bottom heavy and just heavy overall at 9.1 ounces when you compare it to its peers. And yes, it's not the bounciest or springiest super trainer out there, but again, I think with those trade-offs, you kind of take on a unique, different feel where you have a little bit more support. You're not as squirrely in the heel, and you have a very supportive base that really does let you push the pace. If you like something that isn't overly soft or like a slightly firmer yet still squishy shoe, just because you have a lot of Lightstrike Pro in the forefoot, again, about 14% more compared to the prior version, I think the Boston could work quite well for you. And it is a solid long run shoe, and I think anything else in between. It is very versatile. I don't think it's one of those super trainers that's really kind of relegated to a specific pace or type of running. I think the Boston is able to kind of handle everything in between. Well, that concludes my review. Let me know in the comments what you think of this new Boston update. I would love to hear from you. I'm Ryan from Ryan's Running Reviews, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.